Hello, I'm Ryan Parsley, and I want to show you a workflow that uses Illustrator for mocking up websites. So the first thing we are going to do is create a new document. You'll probably want to change these based off of reality, but for this demo purpose, I'm just picking a 1280 by 800 screen size. All of these settings can be changed later, so don't feel the anxiety of you have to get them right the first time. But this is the way I tend to start my projects. Color mode RGB because it's for the screen. Raster effects 300 because I want them to look good. If you find that your illustration is getting a little bogged down because you have too many textures or something, you can always throttle down raster effects while you're working, and then before you export or show someone, you can turn them back up. So that's great. You can kind of have the best of both worlds. And then I tend to like for the web to do preview mode as pixels as opposed to overprint, because it is more likely to highlight legibility problems or little blurry half pixel issues. Overprint mode kind of hides the truth from you a little bit, and we don't want that. It is great if you're trying to do a logo that you don't know what size it's going to come out, but if you're working close to 1:1, you may as well go ahead and switch over to pixel mode. So with no further ado, let's create that document. So come over here, create a rectangle, put it anywhere you like. We know that we want it to be 800 because I want it to be the height of the artboard. I'm not sure exactly how wide I want it to be. 1,000's a good guess. So I'll go ahead and create that. We're going to change that later anyway. Let's go ahead and swap our colors, turn off our border. This is actually a little dark for what I'm doing. Go up here and change your little color blender mode. You didn't actually change the colors of your document. Like, this isn't a grayscale document now, it's still RGB. It's just this slider is much simpler. If you happen to know the CMYK value you don't have to be in a CMYK file to use that. Now, if you're in RGB CMYK colors, they don't necessarily map as cleanly as you might want, but I mean, it's pretty close for what we're doing today. But just know that you can really simplify things for yourself like that. Now I want to go ahead and center. Now notice how when I hit center, it doesn't center. Why is that? A lot of times you'll find that Illustrator is aligning based off of your selection. Well, if you've only selected one object, it's already centered based off the selection. But if you want to align to the artboard, just change that. Now you don't have to do that fake, like create a layer in the background, select both to center like you do in Photoshop. You can just align it straight to the artboard. It's like it's a permanent layer that you can base things off of. So that's super useful. Select that path, go up to Object, Path. We're going to create a new grid. It's super easy. You don't have to go online and download somebody else's grid that may or may not be exactly what you want. I said I want a 9-column grid. I think my font size is going to be about 12 pixels. So let's go with 18. I'm going to start off with an 18 pixel gutter and then also an 18 pixel baseline. It's just for, about 1.5 ems. Now, what's great about this little calculator dialog box is the total is your original box. I entered how many columns I want and what gutter, and it said, oh, well, if you want those other three to be true, this is what this value has to be. Well, I don't really want these fractions of a pixels. So I do want 18 pixels and I do want 9 columns. So an easy way to change your width, you could just bump down your column count until this becomes a whole number of some sort. So I'm 999, fine. Really what I care about is my number of columns and my gutter width. If that's not quite right, or you see 95 and for some reason you want it to be 96 or whatever, you can always adjust that number and then play with this until you get where you want to be. One thing that you'll notice is that there's this kind of little funny gappy thing here. What you want to do is go ahead and apply this, and then select all of your paths, group them. Once they're grouped, you can center them based off of your artboard again. Now go back into Object, split up into grid. It's centered because this object, actually let me show you in another way. This group is now 999 pixels, right? That original box that we created, the rectangle, doesn't exist anymore. We instead have these 9 paths. So that's why I jumped out, grouped them, centered those, because otherwise you'd have been off by about half a pixel. So you only have to do that if you change the box the bounding total area. What is great about this is you can go back in here again later if you decide that you want a 6-column grid and change that. You can always change all of the everythings at any given time. So I'm going to set that back to where we were, turn on my guides. It's just that easy. You're not going to get stuck in these same kind of ruts that I tend to when I'm trying to do grids in Photoshop. These boxes, we're going to save those so that we can edit this later, so that we can find them easy enough. Let's name that group. Turn off visibility. Now notice when I said create guides though, this is actually a group of paths. That's okay, we can fix that. First off, I don't need these horizontal ones. So if I want to pick just some of the elements, use direct select, delete. Notice those 2 pixels off to the side there. Hit delete a second time to get rid of those. Now I'm going to select everything. Just to be tidy, I only want these to be 800 pixels wide. Make sure that you're not constraining your proportions, and just change your height to 800. Nice and clean. Go up with everything still selected to guides, make guides. And now all of those paths are guides. So let's name this group guides for tidiness. And I have a convention of naming the layer whatever the column count is. So 9, column 18. Gutter. Because in any given document, you can have a lot of grids, and while you're still trying to figure out what it is that you want. So far, so good. Now I would like to have some rulers for my baseline grid. I'll do that much in the same way, except instead of using a box or a rectangle, I'm just going to use a line. Make sure the angle is 0. I want it to be 999. Take that line, make sure that you're aligned to Artboard, center it, bring it up to the top. Now go to Effects, Transform, Form. We're going to make about, I don't know, make an educated guess. I want 30 copies of this line. Preview it. I want to shift them 18 pixels because that's the grid I said I wanted. So we don't hit the bottom. So I want more of them. Now I have plenty of lines. They're all green. I tend to like my baseline to be red. Creature of habit. That. So now we've got our baseline grid. I tend not to make these into guides because I don't really want anything to snap to them. I don't like how Illustrator does that by default. These are just a visual indicator for me. So since that's the case, I'm going to go ahead and turn down the opacity and lock these layers so I don't accidentally touch them. And then create a new layer. And this will actually be my layout. So we have the building blocks that we need to have a good design. So let's just, based off of the sketch that I had earlier, I just want to do a very simple kind of bloggy type thing. We're going to bring a header down. Again, I want to get back to just using gray scale colors to kind of work everything out. This, you can see the attributes of this. It's 1280, but it's off by a pixel. We can make it perfect by just typing these. We don't have to worry about just being stuck with the align tools. You can also use the transform tool to move everything around. Let's say that we want to put a logo in here. Going on. Here's a good trick when you have your select tool. If you option click shift to constrain axes, you'll make copies and slide them around. I'd like 2 more buttons. You know, a little bit of a navigation thing. And now we'll see another way to align. I've got these 3 buttons. I like where this button is. Notice how it has a darker highlight around it now? That's because it is now a key object. And you'll notice that we're aligning to a key object. It automatically does that for you. All I did was shift click all 3 of them and then come back without shift pressed and click one of them again to designate it as the key object. Now I would like 18 pixels horizontally between these objects. There you go. Alignment couldn't be easier. Just to confirm that they are all they're all aligned up on the bottom. I select all 4, click to make it a key object. If I wanted them centered, you can see I didn't click one. If I wanted them centered, I could do that. Top align, bottom align. Notice this doesn't move whatsoever. And because this nice bold line, I like that indicator because sometimes in Photoshop you're not really sure which one's going to be moving, right? Wait, is it the first one I clicked? Is it the last one I clicked? Is it the one on the top of the layers in ordering? Right? You never know. Was it the last one that moved? The first one that moved? The one that hasn't moved the longest? All of these things, it just seems easier for me to know which one's going to be my key object. You got the nice border. So let's go ahead and put in, put a little text in. Actually have a chance of reading that. It doesn't really matter. It's just kind of basically some Greeking. Drag this over about where we want it. Create a little text box down here. Use text expander, so you can do my little snippet to put some Greeking in. I find this a little bit slower than I'd like, but it seems like it's the tool everybody likes. So we'll line up all of our text here. Now I don't like how this text is by default. So what I'm going to do, instead of going into the character palette, I'm going to use paragraph styles though. So here I have all the same character things that you would otherwise have up here. But I'm going to create a paragraph style, sort of like having a class in CSS, or if you've used paragraph styles in InDesign, it's almost exactly like that, except not quite as nice. So I'll pick my family. I like Trebuchet pretty good. We'll actually make it be 12. It already was, but we want the layer style to dictate that. If you leave them blank, then applying the layer style won't change something. So we want to make sure that we do every time change our font size and font style. That's that. Notice how if you click this, there's no little plus, so that is the default of a normal paragraph now. So I can do now, Alt Shift click, move this over here. We have a sidebar. But I would like to have a new layer style. Pick a paragraph style 1. This will sometimes not remember that it's based off of the general paragraph style. No big deal, just got to change this. And this one's, call it cyan, all right? So now we have our two styles, a normal paragraph and what I will call the aside. Oh, another great thing that I like a lot about Illustrator is the way that you can work with gradients. So let's make another box, and we want it to be 1280, 800. We want it to be the whole background. It's in the right spot already. But we want it to have a nice gradient. Go from dark to light. But that is too dark for me. I only want it to go about 75 into about, I'm calling it 50. Yeah, that's pretty good. Bump this up closer to 2/3. So notice how, I didn't have to keep dragging this, dragging the gradient tool and kind of guessing. It's perfectly by the numbers. If I want this midpoint to be exactly 2/3, I can just do, and it is, right? That doesn't always make for a better design, but it is faster if you know roughly what it is that you want. You can change things really, really nicely. Now it's in the wrong place, so I'm gonna cut this, pick furthest back object I can think of, and paste behind. There we go. So now that I've made that gray, we're going to have some legibility issues. Let's go ahead and solve that with putting a little bounding box. Again, cut it, select the layer that you would like to paste behind. Couldn't be easier to just reorder everything. Notice I don't touch my layer palette. I do tend to label things when I have to touch them. I will rename them. But I don't go in there and rename everything. That's kind of a waste of time because it's so easy just to select things like I'm doing. Shift click, drag it over. We need another little box. This one I would like to be a bit darker. Down. Something like that. You know what? I made those nice baselines, but I didn't actually make anything stick to them. I want this layer behind this layer. Touch of padding. You get the general idea of what I'm trying to do. Now another thing I like very much that I don't believe Photoshop has, if so, I don't know how to do it. So say I want to do a placeholder for a graphic here, right? Bring them half the width. But I want that text to flow behind it. What's the easiest way to do that? Well, there's a handy little thing up in the menu here where you can just create a text wrap around that. So you can select your object, text wrap, make. And now you can see how everything will flow around that object. Super handy, just like if you're doing page layout with InDesign or Quark. You can do that for your little web layouts just as easy. And if you don't like, you go into text wrap options. If you don't like, if it's not enough padding, you change that after the fact. Good generous 18. All right, everything else is 18. You can see how that works. That's a super handy tool for just really quickly getting your layout idea. And then the other thing is that I like a lot is the way that border radius works. You can apply that after the fact. I've already had these objects. Well, I want them to be more buttony. do my rounded corners. I can even preview them, although that usually doesn't work out because of the bounding lines. So just go ahead and make them, look at them. Yeah, that works for me. So you can see it kind of starting to come together. If I wasn't annotating every step, I'd be through this considerably faster. But I do want to make sure that I'm highlighting all the tools. What's awesome is you can go through and just change the aside now. I don't think blue isn't working for me. I want to just be white. If you had multiple paragraphs, you wouldn't have to select them all. I just changed what that paragraph style looks like. And then also you can do graphic styles, which I like a lot. So maybe you have a common palette, ways you want things to look for internal documents. Or if you use like Twitter Bootstrap, you could create one of these for yourself so that everything kind of already looks like the default objects. You can use them for all kinds of things. Or just using styles from one project to the next. So for instance, I want this button to have the style that I created earlier of subtle texture button. And it happens to erase our border radius that we had before, but we can fix that just going up and reapplying it. And now we've kind of got this neat style button. It's got a bit of a gradient. It's got two gradients, a linear gradient with a little subtle radial gradient in front of it. And then I also applied two gradients to the borders. A little tricky to execute in CSS, but looks pretty nice. I've got this darker texture header style that I've already created. Perhaps I want to do a little bit of an inset shadow here. Drop shadow give the illusion of depth on my main element. You can see how once you've got your information architecture stuff kind of all figured out, you kind of know what elements you need on the page, and you've placed them roughly where they go. You can see how you can really change what they look like. And it's easy enough now that we've used these grayscale texture elements to give us the right feel, the right tone. And then you can always come through, select your objects, go into your appearance palette, and change these colors to something else. Pick your corporate color palette. Notice all the effects. It's still got the drop shadow. It's still got the rounded corners. All I did was change the background color. But you don't want to do that too soon. That's sort of your last step, worrying about things like that. But hopefully this helps you see why some people like myself are very passionate about using Illustrator for starting off their web prototypes. Thanks.